At the same time, at the base of the Eastern Province Command, there was a high-ranking military officer named Chui observing a screen. His eyes were filled with confusion and surprise, as he could not believe what his eyes had just seen. He was in a room that was full of computers and soldiers who were in charge of monitoring and controlling the units. One of the soldiers, who had his arm behind his back, raised his hand to the sky and reported that there was a SSS level threat, giving orders to the elite team Wolf Teeth and Sharp Blade to head immediately to the coordinate points. Upon hearing his voice, all the soldiers' attention focused on him. One of the men, who had a scar on his eye, named Qin, turned around and with a confused look asked his friend why they were making so much noise, and if they knew what the mission was about. The soldier from before gave the order to troops 5, 6, and 8 of heavy infantry to be ready for combat at any moment. One of the soldiers mentioned that he remembered that the SSS threat belonged to the terrorist organization from the land of the lion, called Society of Black Magic. Upon hearing this, Qin's expression changed. He turned to his friend and with a serious look explained that now that the Society of Black Magic was involved, this mission was going to be really dangerous. Chui began to observe his friend with a confused look and asked what he was talking about. Qin closed his eyes and revealed that 3 years ago there had been a terrorist attack by the Society of Black Magic within the Southern Military District, and at that time, he was part of the anti-terrorist team, asking his friend if he knew how many people had been deployed. Upon hearing this, Chui's eyes filled with surprise. He did not know that his friend had been part of the anti-terrorist group. He replied that he did not know. Qin opened his eyes and his gaze filled with fear, causing him to start sweating. He began to remember the powerful members that the team had, revealing that more than 500 members had been deployed, among them more than 20 level 7 masters, and among them were 5 great masters of level 8. But still, in the end, the target managed to escape alive. That day had been the most embarrassing day for the Eastern Military Department. Chui approached his friend, started to observe him, and with a serene look thought that this was too terrifying. He could not believe that with that level of operation, the target had managed to escape, asking his friend if it was true that the people of the Black Magic Society were so strong. He began to look straight ahead and with a serious look revealed that they were monsters. In front of him there was a table with some suits. He started to touch his tie with his hand, began to observe the suits, and told his friend to change equipment since it was time to leave. Chui's gaze was filled with surprise. He started to look at the suits and couldn't help but feel somewhat surprised. They put on the suits, and several hours later, the two men arrived at the Eastern Military District. They headed to the coordinates sent by the team, and upon arriving at the scene, Chui was shocked to see what was in front of his eyes. Meanwhile, on the other side, Qin began to observe with a calm gaze and started to think in silence. In front of them was Bayman's corpse cut in half. Both men were shocked and confused at the same time. They couldn't believe that the target was already dead. Qin bent down, rested one hand on his knee, began to extend the other towards the corpse, and with a serious look explained that even after being dead, his aura was very powerful, and judging by the blood, he must be a great master of level 8. Chui, who was speechless and at a loss for words, started to observe the corpse and fell silent. With a surprised look, he remembered that in the whole world there were only about 1,000 great masters of level 8. The death of one of them was going to become big news, and judging by Bayman's appearance, he thought this guy didn't seem to be from the land of the dragon. Qin approached the corpse, and with a serious expression explained that he had not been mistaken, and that this guy really belonged to the Society of Black Magic. Bayman's body had been cut in half perfectly, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Around the body a pool of blood formed. Qin mentioned that although the members of the Society of Black Magic were not ordinary people, this great master showed not a trace of pain or fear on his face, which meant that before dying he hadn't even realized the attack, being cut in half in an instant. Qin began to bring his hand closer to the corpse, mentioning that he could not imagine that visual sensation. At that moment, Chui's attention was fixed on the corpse and his eyes filled with surprise as he realized something. He was terrified, and with a surprised look he asked Qin to wait a moment and ordered him to look at what Bayman had on his back. Qin complied, approached the corpse and placed his hand on Bayman's back, and with a calm expression, began to turn the corpse over. Upon seeing the tattoo that Bayman had on his back, Qin's eyes filled with fear. He recognized this tattoo. He was the leader of the Black Magic Society that they had not managed to capture in the southern military zone 3 years ago. Chui started walking towards him and with an expression full of confusion asked if he was saying that someone had defeated Bayman in one blow whom neither 20 masters nor 5 grand masters had been able to stop at that time. He did not know then why that person had asked them to come here after having killed the target. Qin began to look at the corpse with a serene expression and started to think. He began to touch his head with his hand and came to the conclusion that Lu Sheng wanted them to clean the area. At the same time, in the Eastern Military District Command, there was the marshal. Behind him were 2 high-ranking soldiers. He sat in the armchair, crossed his legs, took out a tablet, and couldn't help but start smiling upon seeing that Lu Sheng had killed Bayman with a single blow. According to him, if Lu Sheng wanted to kill him too, he would probably do it with a single blow as well. He raised his head, closed his eyes, and let out a sigh of relief since finally the army was going to have a true supreme master of martial arts. At the same time, Lu Sheng arrived at the entrance of a tunnel. While his body was emitting a powerful golden energy, he began to observe the area in silence. In that moment, a powerful red energy appeared, and upon seeing this, Lu Sheng's eyes filled with surprise, as this projection of will seemed much more powerful than he expected. He extended his hand and invoked a powerful flame of golden and red fire. He began to observe his hand and could not help but be astonished and somewhat surprised. It turned out that he had been wrong last time. Using this to simulate another person's combat will was completely useless. According to him, it was better to simulate his own will. Lu Sheng closed his eyes and concentrated, making the flames become more intense. Using spiritual power, one could build a manifestation of their own will outside the body. In an instant, Lu Sheng's manifestation of will left his body, and although the real body could not move, this manifestation could travel thousands of kilometers, and with a single thought, it could return instantly. At that moment, a perfect clone made of manifestation of will appeared behind Lu Sheng. It was emanating the same aura as our boy. This was not a simple technique, it was clearly a divine ability of the martial path. Lu Sheng began to control the clone, clenched his fist, grabbed his wrist with the other hand, and with a penetrating gaze realized that with this one could do many things that the physical body could not perform, like flying, passing through the ground, going through walls, or even entering the women's bathroom. It must be said that our boy has some rather special thoughts. He began to imagine Lian Su on her knees. He placed his hand on top of her head, making her eyes fill with fear. Now he could use this clone to eliminate people like her. Lu Sheng started to smile and couldn't help but feel happy since no one would know he was responsible. Even if he were discovered, it wouldn't matter much. Lian Su had crossed certain boundaries, and even the wife of the martial saint would not be able to bear the consequences of her actions. He began to imagine Lian Su lying on the ground and crying. In front of her was the martial saint turning his back on her. Once the martial saint considered that the cost of becoming enemies with Lu Sheng and the forces backing him was greater than the value that Lian Su brought him, then Lian Su's title of wife of the martial saint could also lose its importance. Lu Sheng began to control his manifestation clone and entered into the tunnel. He had checked several times the connections in their life trajectories between Lian Su and himself, and her death would not cause much commotion. It seems that this woman, after bringing out the lament of the saint and collaborating with Society for Black Magic, had paid a price that surely left the martial saint very displeased. Lu Sheng's eyes filled with joy, and with a smile he thought this was a viable option. Lu Sheng entered into the tunnel and activated blood power. His energy began to expand throughout the tunnel, causing the other end to start shining. Lu Sheng could not help but feel excited as they had already arrived. At the other end of the tunnel, 2 people arrived. Our boy did not know how strong this projection of will was going to be, but these 2 members of the Black Magic Society had arrived just in time. Lu Sheng used his power again, and a tornado made of fire appeared and pierced through the ceiling of the tunnel, creating a large hole. At the same time, one of the members of the Black Magic Society started looking at his watch and realized that it was almost time. The man crossed his arms and began to look at the woman and explained that the high-speed train on which their target was traveling was going to pass by here at any moment. The woman also crossed her arms and with a serene look decided that it was better to act here and finish as soon as possible. While the man who had his arms crossed was distracted thinking, a golden energy approached them and passed by their side. Upon feeling this energy, the man's eyes filled with fear and alertness. He did not know what was happening. The man bent down and began to use his power, causing a blue energy to start covering his body. Upon seeing this, the woman also began to use her power, making her eyes start to shine. They knew that with such an intense threat, it was better to prepare for combat. The woman transformed into a dragon demon, and the man into a powerful werewolf. In the sky was the projection of martial will of Sheng. He crossed his arms and started observing them. The man began to look at the sky, and upon seeing this, with a confused look asked his companion Teng Fei if he was a god. Teng Fei got angry, clenched her teeth tightly, and with a look full of rage asked him to stop saying nonsense. She thought that he could be a manifestation of the martial saint. The man was somewhat surprised, began to observe Sheng, and explained that he was not a manifestation of the martial saint, since the manifestations of the martial saint were not so weak. Moreover, as he remembered, none of the three martial saints of Luang had the appearance of a young man like him. Sheng, who had his arms crossed, began to observe them and remained silent. He started to extend his hand towards the sky and with a smile asked them who they were. He extended his hand towards them, causing a giant hand made of golden energy to start advancing towards them, asking how they dared to cause a commotion here. Feeling this strong pressure, both Teng Fei and the man fell to their knees on the ground and began to prostrate themselves before him. As the man's body was trembling, he raised his head and with an angry look asked who he was and what kind of technique this was. Sheng extended his hand towards them and with a suffocating look called them insolent. He could not believe that he had dared to call him by his name, revealing that he was the god of the night. He used his power again and ordered the man to kneel before him. Sheng's energy made the man kneel before him, hitting his head hard against the ground. Sheng sighed and with a lost look thought that these disgusting rats would not even understand even if he explained it to them. With a gaze full of hatred, he ordered them to hurry up and die. He prepared to launch a powerful attack to end their lives, and upon feeling this, the man lifted his head from the ground and became alert. With a determined look, he decided that if they did not dodge the attack, they were going to die. Sheng launched a powerful attack towards the ground, creating a great explosion. But just at that moment, Teng Fei and the man gained momentum and retreated from the area, dodging the attack. Sheng extended his hands to the sides and a powerful golden ring appeared behind his back. While our boy's eyes were shining, he called them disposable rats again, and for daring to challenge him, he decided to go right now to summon an immortal to annihilate them on the spot. The man began to get angry and with a confused expression asked if this was some kind of joke. Meanwhile, on the other side, Teng Fei became somewhat nervous. She started looking at Sheng and explained that the term God of Night was familiar to her. She had heard that he was a divine figure from Luang's popular legends. Upon hearing this, the man turned his head towards her and with a surprised look asked what she was talking about. Sheng crossed his arms and began to observe them in silence. The man raised his head, started to look at Sheng and realized that they had encountered a popular deity of Luang. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.